I wouldn't be surprised if YouTube takes this down. They're talking about right now, they're trying to understand how such a tiny minority of the population is able to push such vast amounts of insanity that the majority of the population disagrees with, but can't seem to get around. Can't seem to speak out against or effectively combat, and I'm going to explain why. I'm going to tell you why that's the case. The reason is because the ideology of Marxism grants counterfeit virtue to those who adhere to its ideology. So people that adhere to Marxism, which you can conceptualize as the radical left, gain counterfeit virtue. They're told that they're good people as a result of blindly adhering to all the ideologies of the radical left, okay? But the people that don't adhere to the radical left also know that the radical left claims to have a monopoly on virtue, on status, and so they know that since they don't adhere to the system of counterfeit virtue, they will automatically be labeled and demonized as other, as worse than, as predators of progress, as ultimately corrupt and untrustworthy and not equal. So they know that they will be labeled as that, and so this creates a massive mental barrier for the average person. I can tell you, so I'm extremely high in trait disagreeability. You have to be super high in trait disagreeability and high in extroversion to even be able to speak out against these people, because disagreeable people, maybe if you really push them, they'd say they disagree with you, or they would just, their actions would show that they disagree with you, but they're not going to like go out of their way. Don Jr. just raised a really good point where he's saying, where are all the soccer moms saying that this is absolutely insane, what they're doing with kids? Basically, so much of what is happening right now in the world in 2023, if you had said that this would happen 5 years ago, you would say, that's impossible. That must be satire. Like, that's just absolutely crazy. So much of what's going on right now is literally satire, like, come to life. It's like insane. Insanity is the norm everywhere. Like, the radical left is attacking every possible metric and framework of coherence, and they also asked why that is, and they sort of got to an answer. Don said, we could go through a history of communism, and he's on the right track there. The answer is the animated spirit of Cain, which is a resentment of reality, resentment of the objective parts of reality that judge you. The reason for that is because if objective parts of reality judge you, then you are accountable to something other than yourself, and you can't be your own God. You can't insist everything is a social construct, and that it's all personal choice. This is the reason they the radical left attacks objective reality, is because they want to be the masters of reality. They want to be the masters of themselves, when of course you can't be, because gravity is real whether you like it or not. Men and women are psychologically different whether you like it or not. Men and women are physically different whether you like it or not. Capitalism is a mechanism that creates value, not an economic proposal, whether you like it or not. These are immutable facts about the nature of reality itself. You would understand this. I recommend people study physics to understand what I mean by reality. It gives you a good first principle understanding of what reality is. But that's what I mean when I say reality. I mean the immutable characteristics of objective frameworks themselves. The radical left attacks the objective frameworks so that they can make reality in their own image, and so that they don't have to be accountable to, archetypally speaking, God. I don't mean I'm not speaking about theology. I'm not speaking about religion per se. I'm saying that archetypally speaking, God is the thing at the top of the value matrix that orients and organizes and judges everything underneath. It organizes you. So they are, conceptually speaking, attacking God by attacking reality. They attack accountability. Why is it that radical feminists are so afraid of accountability and get upset and run away and scream and screech and become very triggered when you interview them on the street and ask them basic, simple questions which lead to the disintegration of their ideology when analyzed properly? The reason they get upset is because they are actually they're not encountering disagreement. What they're encountering is accountability. What they are encountering is a prompt to coherently analyze that which would lead to the disintegration of all of their ridiculous beliefs. And again, so these people on the podcast, Nelk is asking, why? What's the reason? What's the reason these people have those ridiculous beliefs? What's the reason Marxism exists? The reason is because they are attacking objective frameworks. They are at war with reality. They are actually at war with reality itself. Imagine being at war with gravity. It sounds absurd, but it is not an exaggeration for what's going on now. Imagine somebody says to you, I'm at war with gravity. I disagree with gravity. It's not real. It's a construct. It's a social construct. But guess what? Reality reminds you that it's real, whether you like it or not. That enrages narcissists who are afraid of accountability. The reason they attack reality is because they are animated by immense resentment. The resentment of not being masters of the universe, the resentment of not having ultimate control, the resentment of reality and objectivity itself, because objectivity judges. God judges, right? In the hierarchy, God judges you. If you believe in God, you understand, religiously speaking, he's in control. He judges your actions. He says what's right and wrong, etc. They attack, similarly, morality, which is, again, a part of an objective framework. Objective framework is the bedrock of morality, because without objectivity, you can't say objectively that this guy did something awful. You can't say that this thing is awful that happened in history. You can't say that genocides are bad. You can't say that, helping people is good. Without objectivity, you can't say that. So I started recording because I want to explain why this is happening, what's going on here, and this is just somewhat of an overlay. There's a deep history which I will go into now that I've explained the fundamental principles of the spirit of Cain in the 20th century as it was manifested by communism. Although communism is merely surface layer. It's not the underlying presuppositions of the ideology. Communism was the greatest evil of the 20th century, and we fought it. And we thought that we understood it, but we didn't. What we didn't understand is that it wasn't an economic proposal. It was a misunderstanding, a misalignment of the human spirit. It was an attack on the idea of individuality. It was an attack on the idea on accountability. It was a proclaiming of the glory of resentment. It was manifested resentment. For the communists, it was, this is where I get deep into it now. Communists, their idea was resentment is to be doled out between the proletariats and bourgeoisie. This is the presuppositions of Marx, who wrote the Communist Manifesto. Marx suggested that people should express resentment, hold resentment against each other based on socioeconomic class, socioeconomic status, right? The bourgeoisie versus proletariat, rich versus poor. This is the general understanding of communism even today, that it was an economic proposal where people need to be equalized, right? Economically equalized. Redistribute resources and give it to the less fortunate to make everyone equal. Okay, that's what communism is, right? Communism, the spirit of communism, which is Marxism, because again, Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto, has been rebranded from the 20th century into the 21st century. So the 1900s versus the 2000s, it got rebranded. The rebranding is no longer about economics, it's about everything. I'll say that again, slowly. It's not about economics, it's about everything. All the ways you can divide people, including, but not limited to, economic status, everything else, race, gender conformity, gender proclivity, gender identity, sexual orientation, whether or not you're disabled or not, your socioeconomic status, just like communism. Every single way an individual is different from another individual can be a way Marxism divides people. This doctrine is called intersectionality. The observation of intersectionalists essentially is that you can divide people infinitely because there are an infinite number of differences between people. Okay, that's what the rebranding of Marxism is. It's called neo-Marxism. It is a rebranding of Marxism. And again, Marxism is the doctrine which created the Communist Manifesto, because Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto. Now, the underlying spirit of the doctrine of Marx is that of resentment. It is that of the spirit of Cain. If you resent people, if you resent those that are not in your group, if men resent women, women resent men, rich resent poor, black resent white, Asian resent black, disabled resent non-disabled, lesbians hate straight women. If you build resentment, you disintegrate society, you disintegrate the objective moral ethics of everything. You disintegrate it all. The reason you do that is so that you can create reality in your own image. Marx wanted to be God. He was upset. He didn't understand what capitalism was. He, like people currently think about communism, he thought capitalism was an economic model. He thought it was an economic suggestion that the world had just accepted over the course of thousands of years. But no, capitalism is not an economic proposal. Capitalism is technically how things are created. This is where I'm going to introduce you to the idea of the Pareto distribution. Jordan Peterson talks about this. The Pareto distribution is an immutable law of reality, similar to gravity, and it holds true in any field that you know about. And it's such a powerful law that I'm surprised many people don't know about it. And this is what it is: the square number of people of the enterprise produce half of the enterprise. So, and it doesn't matter what the domain is. If you have 100 people chopping wood, 10 of them will do half the work over the course of, pick your time frame, over the course of a year, over the course of a month. If you have 100 people coding, 10 of those people, because the square root of the number of the enterprise, will do half the work. This is an immutable law. Same is true for classical composers. I play the violin, right? Out of all the pieces played today, how many composers compose those pieces? The square root. Think of how many classical pieces of art get performed. Not many. Beethoven, Mozart, Bach. Compared to all the composers that ever existed, there's not many, right? And by the way, out of those, how many of, okay, just pick one of them, Mozart's. How many of Mozart's total works get performed, and how frequently? Mozart's total works, the square root of the total works. Let's say for easy math, Mozart created 10,000 works. The square root of 10,000 is 100. 100 out of the 10,000 get played half the time, so 100 get played half the time, and 999 account for the other half, right? So they get played way less. This is an immutable law, which is just to explain to you why capitalism is an immutable feature of reality. It is not an economic proposal. This is part of the breakdown of why Marx is wrong, and he didn't understand this, but he probably didn't want to understand this if he could, because he was animated by resentment. Resentment goes back as far as I mean, you can track the frontal lobe of humans, really, and in biblical scripture it goes back to Cain and Abel, right? Because Abel was God's favorite, Cain, and did everything God wanted, and Cain resented Abel for being rewarded by God, and so he killed his brother, right? Many of you, if you're religious, will be familiar with the story. Again, because religion has to account, they account for resentment. This is the origin of resentment to them. So that's why I call it the spirit of Cain, the ultimate origin, archetypally speaking, of resentment itself, of not just resentment, of the hatred of reality, the hatred of objectivity itself, the hatred of the world is driven by resentment. Now, religious people would also say that, well, they would break that down further into theology. But and it has a lot of value, both archetypally speaking and otherwise. But I'm not going to do that here. Now, so that's neo-Marxism. That's neo-Marxism transposed from the 20th century to the 21st century. It is combined with another philosophy called postmodernism. Postmodernism is a philosophy heavily intertwined and embedded in the Enlightenment principles. The Enlightenment allowed people to think freely and move forward with immense creativity and productivity and transform the world as we know it. So much of the glorious art and architecture and poetry and music was written and created in the Enlightenment, and it was beautiful. The Enlightenment, postmodernism, as I said, is intertwined with Enlightenment principles. So the Enlightenment and postmodernism aren't the same, but postmodernism is sort of an observation or philosophy about Enlightenment. And this is what it is. So I'm going to tell you now what postmodernism is. It is the observation that you can view the world in an infinite number of ways. In some ways, this is the locus of creativity, the infinite potential of physically embodying the world and manifesting the world creatively. So postmodernism makes the true observation that it is possible to observe the world in an infinite number of ways. I'll give you an example. The way I look at something is not the way you look at something, and the reason for that is because we're not the same people. As a matter of fact, if we looked at everything the same way, there would actually be no difference between you and me. There would be no difference. Think about it, right? So everyone is slightly different. Okay, we are more the same than we are different as a species on many levels, but we do view the world differently, and there is an infinite number of ways of viewing the world. Now, so that is a correct observation of postmodernism. This is where there is an error. This is where but then their next presupposition is where they come up with an error. Okay, their next statement is, okay, there's an infinite number of ways of observing the world, but they are all equally valid. False. That is false. It is not true that all ways of viewing the world are equally valid. And this is also intertwined in the truth of creativity, because not all creative endeavors are worthwhile. Most creative endeavors fail, and that's because they're not good enough. They don't merit the architecture of beauty and even divinity that reflects reality. So it's wrong to think that every single way of viewing the world is equally valid. An easy example of this: if I think that I can walk backwards like for the rest of my life, and you think that you can walk forwards for the rest of your life, you're going to do better at walking than I am, because our legs are hinged so that we can walk forward. This is an immutable fact of biology, and it is just true. If I have this glass of water right here, if I think that I can pick up this glass of water with the back of my hand, that's a worldview. I can have that worldview. But it's not as good as thinking I can pick up the glass of water with the front of my hand. If I try to pick up this glass of water with the back of my hand, I will try for the rest of my life and fail. But if I pick up this glass of water with the front of my hand, then I will not, and I can easily drink. So not all ways of viewing reality are equally valid. That's an error. Big error, flashing red lights of postmodernism. Error code, wrong, incorrect. Now, you combine postmodernism, which gets the first part right of there's an infinite number of ways of viewing reality, but the second part wrong of not all they say that it's all equally valid. It's not all equally valid, right? Then you combine this with Marxism, and you get sort of a moral relativist outlook on everything. This is how they crouch their attacks on morality. This is how they crouch their attacks on objectivity itself. They attack objectivity, notions of objectivity, saying, I'll give you an example. Men and women are the accepted norms of categories. But who says so? Who says so? Because I think that there can be more. I think there can be 100. That's an error. But according to postmodernism, they would say that because you can think it, it must be equally valid to thinking that there are just men and women. So this is how they this is the ethos in which they justify their criticisms of all objective frameworks. And they're not just criticisms. I'll amend what I just said. It's not just criticisms. It is they want to disintegrate. They want to utterly abolish all objective notions. And the reason for that isn't just because they can have their own way. It's because the existence of objective frameworks reminds them that they're wrong. It reminds them that they're wrong, which feeds back into their resentment. It feeds back into their anger. It feeds back into reminding them. Think about this. Why is it the radical leftists get upset when they see guys coming out of the gym? You've seen these articles being written. If you don't know, Google it. See, there are articles of women writing about how going to the gym is right wing and white supremacy because men are bettering themselves. But they don't use those words. They say men are going to the gym and this is colonialism and self-improvement and all that. The reason why they're doing that is because in order to... I'll back up for a second. The reason you'd go to the gym is to improve yourself on some level. It doesn't matter if you're Arnold Schwarzenegger or if you're an average guy that goes once a week. When you go to the gym, on some level, you are going to the gym to better yourself. Now, what does the word better and yourself mean? It means that you're aiming somewhere. You're here and you want to go here. In order to even distinguish between here and here, an objective framework is required. So when radical leftists see, ripped guys in great shape coming out of the gym, the reason they get upset is because it is a physical embodiment, it is a physical reminder that objective frameworks are real, whether they like it or not, because they can see it. They can see the difference in the muscles. They can't deny it. This is even with all the hate directed at Andrew Tate, who, by the way, is an embodiment of so many reminders of how the radical left is wrong, one of the reasons they hated him was because he's in great physical shape, and still is even after his release, because you can't argue about it. You can't argue the fact that somebody looks weak versus someone looks strong. Of course, they try to by saying, oh, beauty at all sizes and all that, but everyone knows that's like, it's just... The reason why that's very hard to override is because we have genetic programming, genetic code in our DNA that tells us what to be attracted to. And overweight, obese, sick people are not attractive no matter what you tell people. They're just not attracted to them. A Sports Illustrated model will never be as attractive as an obese woman. It's just, it's impossible. So, You can make people lie. You can make people lie in a tyranny about who's more beautiful, but you can never change the fact that the Sports Illustrated model is more beautiful. It's impossible. It's as impossible as changing gravity. Okay. So, radical leftists, those that adhere to the doctrine of communism, the doctrine of Marx, the immense resentment imbued in both those ideologies, they get upset when they encounter objective frameworks because they get reminded that their entire ideology is totally wrong. They get reminded of that. That's why they get even more upset. Okay, so now you understand a bit more about this entire about what's going on in society. I broke it down for you. I learned this like over the course of I don't know, a while, I guess. But it's worth understanding because this is what is befalling our culture currently, and not just our culture the United States. I'm talking about the entire West. Everywhere in the world that has been lifted out of the darkness by the Enlightenment is now getting betrayed by the misunderstanding, by the hidden falling off places in our ignorance and stupidity. So, objective frameworks trigger the left to no end. That's why they get upset when you say there are two genders, because there are, and they can see it. Like, they can see, oh, woman with curves, long, beautiful hair, different facial features. Man, taller, bigger arms, bigger chest, facial hair, bigger legs, has different interests than the woman, doesn't wear makeup. They can see the fact that they're wrong, right? They can see that there are objective differences, that reality forces upon us objective frameworks, and that it's a beautiful thing. As a matter of fact, freedom is accepting the objective frameworks and being creative and thriving within them. Slavery is denying truth. So they live in slavery because they deny reality. And what's crazy is they call reality slavery because they are narcissistic and possessed by the spirit of Cain, possessed by resentment beyond your comprehension, or maybe not beyond your comprehension if you're a radical leftist who is listening to this, and you will just use many insults to attack me, like white supremacist, I don't know, any type of insults that are going around these days, because the only thing that the radical left can do is demonize you. Since they can't contend with the merit of anything that I've said, they can't contend with anything that I've said using the mechanisms of truth, like reason, rationality, logic. They can't use those things. So all they can do instead is attack you. So be very demonize you. So be very wary of anyone that leverages ad hominem attacks. Ad hominem attacks just means insulting you, attacking your character as a person, telling lies about you. Any person that does that is playing a nefarious game. They are trying to demonize you, call you a bad person, so that they don't have to contend with what you have to say. So they don't have to listen to you, think, formulate an answer, and say something that makes sense. They don't want to do that because they can't do that, because Marxism doesn't allow for any of that. Because again, Marxism, what does it do? That's right. It attacks all notions of objective frameworks, including making sense of ideas and saying things that make sense. So that's what's going on here. And I just wanted to explain that because I was watching this interview, and that's very important to do. Okay, good.